This is the first Photoshop basic session. We've already covered earlier in this session the upper menus and the panel bar on the side, and just sort of gave a run through of how things work. As you're looking at Photoshop on my screen there, I've got some pictures set up here that I'll use for this next section here. What we're going to be talking about now is overviewing this toolbar down the left-hand side of the picture. I can change the size of the toolbar just by going back and forth on these little icons here, this little icon on the top here. I like it this way typically, so I leave it that way. The toolbar is shown here on the left, a little bit bigger on, so you can sort of see what things are. And I've also got the ability to do a little magnification here, which we can do once in a while, hopefully help you out to see these things a little bit better. So we're going to be talking down this toolbar, and I realize this is an overview. There's no way in heck we can cover everything in depth here. There's some of these tools here are a workshop in and of themselves. Today is just an overview. We intend to hit these tools over and over again in future workshops as we talk about layers and layer masking and some of the techniques of editing photos, more advanced techniques, and we'll get into these tools over and over again, so don't worry about that. Let's start at the very top here, okay? This is just the move tool here. If I try to move this, you'll notice this background layer and locked. If I try to do something to background layer, like move it, I'm going to get an error message here. Okay, currently selected layer is a background layer. You cannot move it. Okay, so I'm not going to convert it to a normal layer. What I find, if I want to show the move tool easily, I go to the background layer and copy the background layer. How do I copy it? Layer, new, copy, layer via copy. So now it's copied this layer here. Another easier way to do that, another shortcut that you can remember is Control Z. So if I go to the history panel, you'll notice there's a lot of things that I've done already to this layer. But let's go to Control Z, which does the new layer I just did. Control Z. Now if I want to copy the layer quickly, there's a shortcut called Command or Control J. Okay, it does the same thing as we saw before. Now I've got a layer. Why did I do that? Well, I want to move it. I couldn't move the background layer, so now I can move this layer around. You can see that. Okay, I can move it around. The other things you can do when I click on a layer to move it, these little handles show up on the side. I can change the size of this layer. Okay, and you'll notice it keeps the aspect ratio the same as I do this. Okay, so I can change the sides of it. If I hold down the Shift key, I can change the aspect ratio. Okay, so if I don't do the Shift key, it keeps the aspect ratio. If I do Shift key, it changes the aspect ratio. Okay, so I can change this around. I can move it around. That's the move tool. There's not much more to it. Once you've done the move and you're ready and you like where it is, you have to commit it. Otherwise, if you try to use anything else, you'll wonder why you can't do it because you haven't checked commit yet. So if I want to not commit it, I can do it this way. If I want to commit it, I'll do it this way. Okay. For right now, we won't get into all these other controls up here, but every tool that we click on down here is going to have a different set of controls up above, options, if you will. So let's commit that tool. All right, now I've got this big layer with a little layer on top of it. Don't really want to do that, so I'm going to go to the history panel, go back to the very beginning here, and say just give me the starting image. Okay, I'm going to start this thing all over again. That's the good history panel. That's the move layer. Now we're going to get into, that was moved, the selection tools down here. Okay, so the first selection tool we're going to get into is this little square one up here. If I can get up to it, that's not going to. This little magnifying glass isn't going to let me do that. Little first one up here, which is the rectangular marquee tool. Okay, you'll notice that options show up here again. There's options here for adding, subtracting, whatever, and style normal, select and mask. So let's just use, what is the rectangular marquee tool? It's pretty simple. It's a selection tool that allows me to pick off a rectangular area in the picture. Okay, and what can I do with a rectangular area? Well, I can make adjustments to it. And when I get into masking and everything else, there's some things that we can do with selections. So this is a typical selection. You've got marching ants, what's called marching ants around it. You can see this area has been selected, and there's things you can do. If I do, for example, an adjustment, if I go up to Image, Adjustments, and Levels, if I do a levels adjustment on this particular layer, say for example, I want to bring in this area here, I can change just that particular area of the picture. I can darken it, lighten it, whatever I want to do. Okay, so So now I've changed that column here. If I hadn't, you'll unfortunately see the sidewalk here has changed. If I go back without the selection now, let's go back again to the very beginning of the picture. With no selection made, if I did that same edit, image adjustment levels, if I did the same adjustment to that particular, it changes the entire picture. Okay, so that's the difference. Selections allow you to use to change particular parts of the picture versus doing the whole picture again. So why would you do that? You would want to say, for example, I want to change the sky, and I'll show you in a second how to do that. So that's the rectangular marquee tool. The elliptical marquee tool is very similar. It does circles or circular areas or elliptical areas. If I hold down the shift key, it does a circle. Okay, if I don't hold down the shift key, it gives me these ellipse. Okay, if I let go of the tool, I can then the tool I can now move it around to where I want it to, and I can do the same thing, make some adjustments in that particular area. Okay, to deselect, you can see the marching ants. To get onto the next tool, I need to deselect the tool. Okay, I can go to select and deselect here, but you'll notice there is a shortcut key, Command D. Okay, so I'll just use the Command D, and I suggest you do that all the time. Command D. You understand these shortcuts. It's a lot easier than going up the top menu bar. So Command D deselects the tool. You can see the history bar says deselect down here. Okay. So that's what I just did there. I just showed you then the rectangular and the elliptical. You don't need to know these others. They're not going to be used. I can guarantee you won't use them. And then there's other tools we can get to here. This is a magnetic lasso tool. I can go around on the tool. I start clicking, and as I move slowly around here, you can see it's selecting off, if I stay close to the edge, what I want to select. It's again another tool I really don't use very much. At one time, many years ago, they thought this was really a great thing, but there has been a lot better tools since then. Since then, that I'll show you in a second. So that's essentially a magnetic tool here. On this kind of tool, when you get around to the other side, you look carefully, a little circle shows up, and let's see if I can find that. See the circle right there? If I move off, the circle shows up. That means you've closed the loop, and I've got my selection. I can make the adjustment in that area here. So deselect that one. A much better way of doing things are some of the modern tools. This is relatively new. This is called the object selection tool. And as you can see, the little cup there in the picture, the object selection tool, you draw a square around what you want to select, and the artificial intelligence in Adobe, which is called Sensei. Sensei will identify the object within that square. So if I wanted to select off, for example, me here, I would get myself in this square and say select that object there, and bang, it did a pretty darn good job of selecting the object. Okay, it didn't get the armpit here, and it missed part of the hat up here, but that's okay. Okay, because there are other tools now that I can use to do that. So for example, to add that hat piece in there, see if it's smart enough to do this, something you do with all the selection tools. Okay, if I hit the shift key, let me get somewhere where you can see that. The shift gives me a little plus sign. See that little plus sign in the blue sky? So if I hit the shift key, it means I want to add something to this selection. If I hit the option key, it gives me a minus sign. I want to subtract something from the selection. So I want to add something. I want to try to add, see if it's smart enough to get the corner of the hat there. Okay, so I hit the shift key and draw a little bit of a rectangle right around there. It started to get there. I can hit it again. Did a pretty good job. Pretty good. Now I want to subtract out that little area down here. I'll hit the option key. It did a pretty good job. So now I'm pretty happy with the selection. It's got a pretty good selection around me, and I can do all sorts of neat things with it, like brighten myself up, for example, if I want to. Okay. You got that? Now I've got a brighter character there. Again, deselect, Command D. And we've got myself done. So if I look at what it was before and what it was after, I was able to do that one area of the picture. So that's the object selection tool. Okay. Here's the crop and straighten tool. Why is it called crop and straighten? Well, let's find an image that needs some straightening. I know I've got one in here. Uh, and let's go back to this picture here. It's a Sydney, Australia, a terrible picture I made. And by the way, zooming in and out, I'm just doing command minus and command plus. So I just zoomed out, command minus. And I also went back to the beginning of this picture. As you can see, this horizon straight. And I'd like to crop this to get rid of some of this water here. That's not a good composition. So let's use the crop tool. So I'm going to crop. And as you'll notice, it comes up. And the ratio I have it set up right now is 16 by 9. If it's the original ratio, it'll set this original ratio, and then it'll keep the ratio as I move around, okay? If I want to switch the ratios, I can hit these little arrows. It'll keep the same ratio, just do parallel or landscape. If I do hit clear, it'll clear the ratio. Now I've got complete control over anything I want. It'll do any size I want. And as I do this, you'll notice it has these rule of thirds lines in it. I can change the rules, if you will, by going to up this little grid up here and saying I'd like the golden triangle instead, or I'd like to go, that's a golden ratio, a golden spiral instead. I just love the Fibonacci rule, so I want to go with the golden spiral in this thing. Once I've got the thing selected, I can click inside the box and move the picture around to put the subject on the Fibonacci golden spiral. So that's, and once I've done that, I commit to it. But you know, this horizon's still screwy. So how are we going to do that? Well, now that I've got that done, I don't have it done. I can hit this little straighten tool above. That's for the horizon. Once I clicked on that, I can go and fix that horizon problem by dragging along the horizon. Now I've straightened out the picture. Let's go back and crop this thing more of a panorama view, 16 by 9. That's a typical panorama. I will get rid of the water by moving this up. I can't go too far because I will go out of the sky here. There is ways of replacing that sky, and in fact, maybe I'll show you that in the next. So we're going to have the sky that's going to be out of the picture. So I want to put more sky in there, but there's a way of doing that. So let's say that that's my composition for now. Let's see, I don't like that. I will take a little bit of more water out of here, and I'm going to create this composition here. All right, so let's say that that's my composition. Got a little problem over here in this corner here, and the sky is there, but I like the composition for now. That was the straighten, crop and straighten tool. Pretty simple. This tool here is a frame tool used for, as you can see here in the picture here, bringing other pictures in, dragging them in, and creating a picture, an inset picture, if you will, another picture inside of this picture. Good for graphic design. Not anything you're going to be using right now, but something to think about. It works pretty well. This eyedropper tool, I'm not sure exactly why it exists, because there's other ways of doing this, but it selects a color. These colors down here, black and white, are the default colors. You can see these colors down here. If I hit D, if there are some other color, I would hit D to make them the default color, and if I hit X, it'll toggle back and forth between those two colors. Okay, so if I want to paint with a different color, it'll would. What this eyedropper tool does is that I can select any color in this picture to paint with. For example, if I want this blue color, it'll say, what do you want to select? If I want to do a point selection, for example, it's going to write the pixel, the one pixel that's right under that little eyedropper is going to get selected. That's probably not a good idea. I want to select something a little broader than that. So I'll do a 5 by 5 selection. I'll click on that, and you'll notice here that this color got selected here. Now if I were to paint with it with a paintbrush down here, I would be painting with that color. So if I hit the brush here and I paint, I'll be painting with that color there. Okay, so that's the reason that tool exists. Although there's other ways of doing the same thing. If I want to select a different color, I can click on the top color here. I get this little panel here. If I go off the panel, guess what shows up? That eyedropper tool again. So I can go and select another color here, for example. You can see that it selected that color there, dark, sort of almost black color. And so I can do the same thing as I do up here. That's why I've never understood why that tool exists. Now, those are some of the crop and slice tools here. Let's get into some of the fun tools here. These are the touch-up tools. Okay, on this particular one here, If you, by the way, a lot of these tools, if you simply click and hold down, you'll see the tools underneath them. The bar on the left, the big bar on the left, is slightly different than mine because they have some of these expanded. I have some of mine embedded in here. So let's just start with a simple tool here, the spot healing tool. This allows me to get rid of certain things. For example, this bridge is a nice bridge, but maybe I don't like those flags up there for some reason. So I'm going to use this little magnifying glass here and double click on it. When I double click, I go to 100%. Okay, I talked about that a little bit earlier in the workshop. This allows me to move things around, and if I double click, it goes back out to fill screen. So if I double click, it fills the screen. If I double click this eyedropper, it goes to 100%. Now, if I want to move over to the people on top of the thing, I can hold down my space bar. The space bar gives me this little hand. Once I got the hand, I can drag over here. Okay, I want to get rid of these flags here. So I go to my spot healing brush. I make the circle. Circle right now, you can hardly see it because it's behind the blue highlight. I'll make that circle slightly bigger than what I want to get rid of. And then I will just draw over the thing I want to get rid of. When I get to a crossbar there, I usually go a little bit into it just to make sure that there's no smudging at the end. So I can get rid of that. Look at those people on top of that bridge. Isn't that neat? Would you like to go up there and stand on that? Okay, so I'm going through here and getting rid of that. I can do all sorts of getting rid of, I can make this bridge weak by cutting off the spires. Now the reason that second one showed up here is it's looking for a source to create this. When I clone, it looks around there to create. So it found this bar over here pretty close. So what I could do is use a different healing tool, this healing tool here, and tell it I don't want that source over there. I want you to use, and I hit down the option key, I want you to use this source over here on this side. So I hit the source there. Now I can go down this thing and get rid of it. Okay? You see the smudge right up there? See that? That's the reason before I talked about going in to the areas up here to get rid of the smudges. So for example, going down this tool here, I would basically go in a little bit. Anyways, sometimes you do get smudges like that. There's ways of getting rid of those. So there you go. That's the healing brush. The patch tool is a pretty clever little tool. Let's see if it'll work on this sky that we had before. Remember, we had this sky problem. And where was it? Oh, it was the Australian picture. I had the right picture up. Let's go back to this thing here. We have the sky up here. Let's see if I can get rid of, for example, this dark area down here. What that little patch tool does is I can go and select an area off using the patch tool. So I just draw around this area here and say I'd like to replace that area with, look at this area as a source, okay? Now if I do Control D, remember deselect, it's been fixed. Now this is a big area to work with here, so I'm not sure that this is going to work very well, but let's see if I can get that sky replaced. There you go. Around here, let's say I want to replace it with that. Okay, there I got the sky fixed, so I'll like a little bit over here a little bit, I guess. So I can go around, and that patch tool is a pretty darn good tool. Every time I deselect, I could Control D to deselect. You can see what I did. I filled in the sky there using that little patch tool, and I filled in this. So now I've got this picture cropped. I was able to put some sky back in there where it wasn't before. Okay, so that's the patch tool. Brush tool, one of the most important brush things in Photoshop, and you'll use it a lot extensively once you get into masks and layers coming up in the next workshop, okay? But there are different size brushes and kinds of brushes. If you go up the brushes up here, there are hundreds of different kinds of brushes, okay? Brushes aren't just round. This is a round soft brush. I can change the size of the brush by doing, you see it's a small brush there, that little circle in the middle. If I do this big here, it's now a larger brush. If I use the right and left brackets, the brackets are the square type of, I can make this brush smaller and smaller as I go through this thing. Oops, sorry. So I can make the brush smaller and smaller, or I can make the brush bigger and bigger using the square bracket keys. So that's a nice thing to know. And so it'll get the hardness of the brush just says if I paint with black on this particular, it's a very hard brush, as you can see. And if I paint with a softer brush, let me get Control Z to get rid of that. If I change the softness of this particular brush to very soft, you'll get a whole different look. Now, soft brushes are extremely important, again, when you get into layers and masking. The opacity of the brush, okay, that's softness. Control Z. The opacity of the brush now is 100%, but if I change the opacity to, say, 30% and do the same brush stroke, do a smaller brush so you can see it, this is 30%, okay? If I change the opacity to 65% or 100%, you can see what happens, okay? The opacity changes. The flow and opacity work together. So if I do get rid of these things, if I do Control Z, if I say, for example, I want the maximum opacity of the brush to be no more than 50%, and these things are extremely important when you're trying to do blending. Again, I'll say, when you're trying to blend things together, you want the brushes to be gentle, you want them to be soft, and you want to build up effects versus do them all at once. So I'll say the flow will be light. I'll say I want a very low flow so that I can build the effect up, and I don't want it to get any darker than about 25%, okay? So as I brush, you'll see hardly anything happen, but I keep on going back and forth over the same spot. It gets darker and darker until it gets up to about 25%, and it stops, okay? So that's how that works. That's how flow works, okay? And flow and opacity work together, okay? So that's the idea with flow and opacity here. Smoothing is another thing when you're trying to make a smooth line versus let me just get rid of what I just did there. So for example, if I've got a brush, I want the brush to be, I'll go up to normal so you can see it, the flow being 100%. And now I'm trying to draw a straight line with this brush. I can click on one side here, hold down the Shift key, click on another side, it gets a pretty straight line, okay? Click, click, using the Shift key, okay? Another way of doing that is if I drag across, I try to make it straight with my mouse, but it's sort of hard. If I do smoothing though, the machine here will help me. It's making a lot smoother line. I'm doing that free-handed, and it helps me make that line smooth. So as I go around, it makes a nice smooth circle. If I try to do that without smoothing on, let me take those off there. So I do that without the smoothing on. Not too bad, mouse. I'm trying to do that with smoothing on. So smoothing just helps, it takes some of the jiggle out of your hand, basically. That's what that is. Okay? So smoothing, and we'll ZZ. That's brush. One of my favorite tools here is the clone stamp tool. Clone stamp tool, I can do things like copy something from somewhere to somewhere else. See if I can find a better picture. That's a good picture here. Let's go back to our history channel. History channel, no, sounds like the history channel. I want to get rid of these trees, these tree branches up here. There's different ways I could have done it. I could use the patch tool, for example. We talked about that. I could go around these little branches here and get rid of them. That's a good way of doing it. So the patch tool works really well for that. But say I forget about the patch tool, I want to get rid of this branch here. I can use a clone stamp tool. I won't be able to do anything until I deselect that. If I try to use this clone stamp tool, for example, it's not going to do anything because remember I can only work in a selection, so I have to first deselect, Command D, hit the Option key. You'll see that the icon changes there when I do that to the source. So I want the source to be these clouds, and I'm going to copy these clouds using the clone stamp into this area here. You can see the little X follows the cursor along, and I'm able to copy those clouds into this area here. So one way to get rid of stuff, to clean up, to do, say for example on people, you want to get rid of whatever moles on their face. It's a good cleanup tool. I could get rid of that horse's strap there. I could get rid of this little branch if I wanted to. So that it's a nice cleanup tool. That's the clone stamp tool. This clone stamp tool is, I don't use the pattern one. I just don't forget about that. Don't even try it. Okay, clone stamp tool. This is a history brush here. History brush is interesting because it'll say, look, I want to undo historically, I want to go back here and undo what I just did. Okay, so I'm going to go back and say this branch here. Yeah, this should be back in there. So I'm just going to brush over what I did before. And although I have too small a brush, I need to make this brush a little bit bigger. And we'll get this tree branch sort of back into where it was before. It didn't do a very good job of it, but oops, I make it too small. Let's make this thing bigger. Okay, now okay, I get the tree branches back in again, and just sort of undo what I did. I'll leave this here, but I'll leave that. I want those branches here. So that's what the history tool. Again, it's not one I use very much. This one I certainly don't use is the eraser tool. It's one of the most dangerous tools in Photoshop. But if I have two layers, and let's make a copy of this layer. Remember, Command J, copy. Or if you can't remember shortcuts, go up to Layer, New, Layer via Copy, which is Command J. Okay. Now I made a copy of that layer. Let's turn off the layer below that. So if I cut a hole in this layer, all you're going to see is empty space, right? So I use the eraser tool and I cut a hole in it. What you see in Photoshop when you see these little hash marks, that means empty space. Because if I turn on the layer below that, it fills in, right? So what I did is just cut a hole in that picture. Okay, and that's useful for some things, but I don't like to use that. There are better ways of doing that. When we get into masking, we'll talk about that. Okay, let's get rid of that. That's the eraser tool. The gradient tool is pretty simple. This shows up here. There's different kinds of gradients. This is going to make a gradient from black to white. I can change where the blacks and whites are on that thing and how the gradient works. Okay, we'll just use this particular gradient here. And leave it at that. If I now draw a line, if I do this kind of line here, you can see it's created a gradient. I've got a different one selected. Let's do this. Let's back up for a second here. I'll take this line and draw it across. Okay, you can see this. It's a nice straight gradient across because I've had that selected there. If I want to make sure that the gradient is straight, okay, and why would I want gradients? Gradients again are going to come in mostly with masking. Okay, not so much for this kind of picture. But let's just do this. Gradients are useful, very useful for masking. If I hold down the Shift key, and the gradient is going to give me, see, I can go back and forth. The gradient is going to give me a straight line across, so it makes a nice straight gradient. If I go straight up or down, it gives me a nice straight gradient. So gradients are different. There are different kinds of gradients. I can do one. This is straight across. I can do a circular sort of gradient, and so that the circle will be different places depending where I start. There are different kinds of gradients. This one here is a center sort of gradient that goes back and forth. Again, holding down the Shift key, putting this right in the middle, I can make a nice straight gradient across the picture. There's different reasons why you'd want to use this. There's some different shape gradients here we won't get into. Let's just get across the gradients, get rid of, I'm going to go back. Using Control Z, I just went backwards. I could have done that also using the history here. Okay, you can see I went back to the history panel here. So the gradients, smudge tool, blur tool, now I don't use that. If I wanted to blur something out, I could do that, I guess, by painting over it. I don't want to do that. I don't typically, I haven't used it. These are very useful tools here. This is dodge and burn. Let me find a better picture to use that on. Let's go back to myself over here. Let's say I wanted to, I already lightened this guy before. Let's go back to history here. Say I wanted to lighten him. He was dark to start with. If I wanted to lighten and darken him, and that's what dodge and burn is. Dodge is lighten, burn is darken. Okay, so these tools work in tandem together. They're very good tools. So if I wanted to lighten the face in this particular case, I could use the dodge tool. Now the dodge tool is set. You can see the size of the dodge tool. I can change the size using the bracket keys, just like I do with brushes. Okay, and I can have it work on only shadows, midtones, or highlights. I'll say midtones for this one. Shadows if I wanted something dark over here. Highlights if I was working out here. And that's a very good thing. I can change the exposure, notice how strong this is. And it works cumulative. So as I go over and dodge a particular area, it builds up. So it doesn't have to be real big. But say 45%. And I'll leave it at that. I'm using a soft round brush, which is typical. Hard brushes are not good things generally. So make sure your size is what you want it to be and the hardness is all the way to 0. And now as I paint over a particular area, you can see my face, my cheekbone there will get lighter and lighter as I click on it, or if I can drag over it. So I can lighten this picture up a little bit, put some light on my hat there, um, make it look like the sun is coming in and hitting the hat right there. So now I've got some light on the thing. I say put a little bit of light on my arms there maybe. So that basically I do this on almost every picture I work on. Do some dodging and burning to bring out things I want to bring out. The burning part works just the opposite. Burn. Say I want to darken that side of the face. I don't know why I'd want to do that, but let's just say I'm really going to be in deep shadow, and so I can darken that side of the face. And maybe darken this arm over here to give us some dimension or whatever. The other thing you can do is if I want to create a vignette in a picture, I can go around and darken the corners a little bit. That's an easy, quick way of vignetting a picture. So I've created a vignette around the picture a little bit. So there you go. That's a way of darkening the picture really quickly. Okay. Did we get in? I'm going to go back to some of these selection tools. I did talk about these. I did not talk about the magic wand tool. I should have talked about that. I'm sorry for jumping back right now. I'm going to talk about the magic wand tool. We're almost through the other tools anyway, so let's do magic wand. I'm going to go back. And the reason I wanted to do that, seeing this picture reminded me, magic wand tool works on color. Okay, so if I want to select a color, say the sky, it's a clear way of doing it. I can click on the sky and it selects the sky. Now you notice it didn't select all of it, and the reason it didn't select all of it is because first of all, I've got the sample size 5x5, which is good. It's just like the other tools. You can tell it, do I want a point sample or want something that's in this area. The tolerance is set to 34. Okay, so I'm going to run the tolerance up. So I want this color blue, but I want you to give me more tolerance there. I want to spread out and look more. So I'm going to deselect that, and then click again. You can see it did almost all of it. I'm going to deselect and do that again. And now I've got all that sky, okay? Another way it got too much, in fact, got into the area here. So let's run the tolerance back down again, like it was before, and show you again. Deselect. If I click here, it didn't select all of it, but remember the Shift key adds, so I can click in here. The Shift key adds, and I got the rest of it. Now, the beauty of that is it's selected based on color. I got the blue. Now, of course, if I wanted to do something like image adjustments, levels, I could easily darken that sky, make it a deeper blue. If there were clouds in that, it would even make it better. So there you go. I was able to darken that sky down just using that color selection tool. Deselect. Now I've got a darker sky. Okay. So that's that magic wand tool, which I don't think I've covered. Where were we before? The burn tool, dodge tools, pen tool. Pen tool is another selection tool. I would not recommend you use it until you get very patient with things, but you can go around and select something based on the pen tool, and the pen tool can get pretty interesting because you can select let's go curved objects. So if I go out and it's hard to see here. That's probably not a good example. Let's go back to, let's see if I've got one of these pictures of something curved. I want to select this curved finger here. I can start with the pen tool down here, right? I will click again here and drag a little bit and create, see the bend there? I can create a bend to the tool. I click back up here, drag a little bit, bend it, select it. Click here, bend it, select it. So what you do is basically going around, holding down the command key. I can do that. Holding down the option key, I can change the next curve. And it's a difficult tool to use, but can be quite useful. Anyways, that's the selection tool. Once I finish that, I turn it into a selection. And so it's something that can be done, but it's a very specialized tool. I wouldn't suggest doing a lot of that kind of thing, okay? Or not until you really get into it and you need to do that. Let me see if I can get out of this particular tool. Okay, let's go into another. So that's the pen tool. Text tool is what it suggests. I can create text by clicking on that. When I create the text, you'll notice it creates a whole new layer on its own. I can now type in this text here. Um, okay, and when I have this up, that's why the property panel. The property panel is pretty important over here. The property panel now allows me to do different things. These scrubbies, when you see things like this in Photoshop, a lot of these things are changeable. You can either type something in, or type it this way, or scrub over the letters here and change the size. So I'll just scrub down. I'll change the kerning on these letters to make them pack together a little bit more. Oh, I did spell horse right, didn't I? A horse. Click them back inside of here. Spell horse correctly. And then so I can change that. I can change if I have several lines on this thing here. Going nowhere. So if I have several lines on this particular thing, I can change how those lines pack together. Okay, and the kerning on them, the size of them, and of course the font. Okay. And what's pretty neat about these fonts is you can get more fonts. Adobe has a whole bunch of different fonts that you can get for free. So there's a lot of different fonts. So if you're into that kind of thing, text is pretty cool. Turn off the text layer here. We don't need that. In fact, yeah, we don't need that. This particular tool here is the path selection tool. I won't get into that. There's almost no reason to have that. The rectangular tool, these tools here, it's not the rectangulars, a lot of different shapes. These tools actually, for example, if I wanted to put a box behind my text, I could do that. So this particular box here, once I put a box, I could say the fill. If I want to fill this box white, and put the text back on there. I won't tell you what I just did there with the layers, but that's why you would do a box, that kind of thing. You want to create something like that. And then I think that's about it. We're getting close to the end here. The hand tool, I think I already told you that. If I double click on an image with the hand tool, it goes back to fill screen. Let me go back let me go back to another image here, which is good. If I go to the magnifying glass and double click, it goes to 100%, right? If I go to the hand tool and double click, it goes back. It should go back to. Hey, come on, guys! Don't make a liar out of me. Why are you not doing that? Okay, man, the hand tool is moving me around. I'm not sure exactly why it's going this way. It usually goes back to fill screen. This is 100%, and this should be fill screen. It doesn't want to do that, so I will do Command minus to go back. And there you go. That's it. I think that's most of the tools. You see these down here. These are color swatches. They're used on brushes. If you click on them, you can bring them up. To get back, if the color swatches are, I'll just pick the color up for sure. If the color swatches are not black and white, you want to get back to black and white, just hit D, gets you back. X toggles you back and forth. You can do the same thing by clicking this little arrow here. Okay. And that's it. I won't get into these things. I don't use them much, okay? So that's it. So I hope you got something out of this. See how interesting it was. And you'll see these tools a lot more in the future. Don't worry if you didn't remember anything, because we'll be using them a lot as we get into the next sections of this little workshop. That's it. I hope you enjoyed it.